In March of 1850, Elias Harwood, one of the wealthiest cotton merchants in Atlanta, made an announcement that scandalized every powerful family from Decatur to Marietta. He was placing a 24-year-old enslaved man named Roman, widely whispered to be the most unnaturally handsome man in the entire state of Georgia, under the private employment of married white women across Fulton County. Elias claimed it was for household refinement, but rumors reported that by August, 9 prominent marriages had collapsed, 3 estates were in legal ruin, and 2 husbands had vanished without explanation. Whispers spread that Roman had destroyed families, though no one could explain how a single enslaved man managed to dismantle some of the wealthiest households in the South without ever raising a hand. What they did not know was that underneath the polished drawing rooms, beneath the magnolia-lined avenues, something far more calculated was unfolding, something Elias Harwood had planned for years. By winter, 6 people would be dead, Atlanta's elite would burn their own letters to erase what truly happened, and Roman would vanish into the night as though he'd never existed at all. Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. In the spring of 1850, Atlanta smelled of iron and pine sap, of cotton dust drifting from wagons that creaked over the red clay roads. Heat rose early that year, heavy and slow, settling on the city like a warning no one yet understood. The Harwood estate lay just beyond the city's edge, an expanse of whitewashed fences, magnolia trees in full bloom, and a main house whose polished shutters gleamed like the eyes of a man who watched everything and trusted no one. Inside that house stood an enslaved man whose presence would soon divide Atlanta's wealthiest families with the quiet precision of a blade moved by an unseen hand. Roman stood near the broad staircase, his posture straight, his hands clasped behind him, his expression unreadable. He had the kind of face that made people stare before they realized they were staring, high, sculpted cheekbones, strikingly symmetrical features, dark eyes that held both stillness and fire. Even the overseers, men who prided themselves on fearlessness, found themselves looking away first. That alone would have been enough to cause talk. But Roman's beauty was something else entirely, something that seemed carved by intention rather than chance, as though God had shaped him to expose the weaknesses of men. "What did Harwood say he is planning?" one servant whispered from the hall, unaware that Roman could hear every word. "He means to place him in the households," another answered, "of the wives who ask too many questions." Roman's expression did not shift. He had learned early that reactions were dangerous, that a single flicker of emotion could be read as rebellion or arrogance. And yet inside him a quiet unease grew. Elias Harwood was not a man to act without reason. Nothing he did was accidental. Everything was a move and a strategy Roman had never been permitted to understand. Footsteps sounded above him, heavy, decisive, belonging to a man who believed the world should make way when he walked. Elias Harwood descended the staircase with a slow confidence, the kind that made the servants lower their eyes even before he reached the final step. His linen shirt was crisp, his coat sharp, his hair combed with meticulous attention. Harwood was not handsome, but he possessed an authority that often replaced beauty in the minds of men who feared him. "Roman," he said, not as a greeting but as a summons. Roman stepped forward. "Yes, sir." Harwood studied him with an intensity that felt colder than the early morning air drifting through the open windows. "The Thornes have requested assistance in their household. You will go." Roman knew better than to ask the question forming in his mind. Why him? Why this new role? Why now? But Harwood, who had built an empire on reading men's unspoken thoughts before they could voice them, smiled faintly. "You will not speak unless spoken to," Harwood continued. "You will observe. You will keep the household orderly. And if Mrs. Thorne engages you in conversation, you will answer respectfully. Nothing more." Roman lowered his eyes. "Yes, sir." What he did not know, what no one yet knew, was that Judge Thorne and his wife Margaret were only the beginning. Harwood had been mapping Atlanta's political landscape for years, identifying weaknesses, secrets, and leverage points. The Thornes were a test. Roman was the instrument. Harwood's wife, Catherine, appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale, her hands clenched on the railing. "Elias," she began, her voice strained, "this is a mistake." Harwood did not turn. "Go back to your room, Catherine." "He is not like the others," she insisted. "Men stare at him. Women whisper about him. You know they do." Harwood's jaw tightened. "I said go back to your room." Roman did not look at her, but he felt her gaze on him. Fearful, suspicious, almost pleading. Catherine Harwood was a woman who rarely spoke against her husband and never twice. For her to speak at all meant something deeper was stirring beneath the surface of the Harwood household. But Roman had learned not to drag curiosity into the light. Curiosity was a luxury that enslaved men rarely survived. As Harwood turned away, Catherine whispered one final warning. Elias, if you send him into their homes, he may reveal more than you want revealed. Harwood paused, but only for a heartbeat. Then he walked on. Roman followed silently, but her words echoed in his mind long after they left the house. Outside, the sun hovered low over the fields, painting the cotton rose in pale gold. Workers already labored beneath the warming sky. Some looked up as Roman passed, offering silent nods. They did not know what he had been chosen for, but they sensed the difference in him. His quiet dignity, his unspoken refusal to break despite the world designed to break him. A young boy named Caleb, barely 12, hurried to Roman's side. Where are they sending you? Roman kept walking. To the Thornes. Caleb frowned. Judge Thorne mean. Overseers say he got a temper like a kicked mule. Roman didn't answer, but Harwood's carriage came into view, the horses restless, as though they too felt something shifting in the air. A breeze stirred the pine branches overhead. The world felt expectant, tense, like the moment before a storm breaks and exposes everything hidden in the fields. Roman stepped into the carriage. Caleb watched him go, whispering a prayer only the wind could hear. Roman did not look back. But years later, he would remember the exact sound of the carriage door closing. A soft but final click, because it was the last ordinary moment before the quiet destruction began. Elias Harwood had not always been the kind of man whose name carried weight in every parlor from Savannah to Atlanta. He had been born into modest comfort, a merchant's son with neither inherited land nor inherited legacy, and perhaps that was why he spent his life carving one out with relentless precision. He built his empire the way a surgeon cuts, calculated, bloodless in intention, merciless in effect. Atlanta had been nothing more than a small railroad town when he arrived in 1832, and yet he saw what others didn't. A future city, a hub of wealth, a place where families would rise and fall based on who controlled its lifeblood. Cotton. He married Catherine Hollingsworth not for love but for position. Her family owned 600 acres, 3 dozen enslaved laborers, and a seat at every political table that mattered. But marriage to Harwood did not give Catherine a life of ease. From the beginning she sensed his chill, the way he measured people not by their hearts but by how tightly he could bind them to his ambitions. She had hoped that marriage might soften him. Instead, it hardened her. Yet even Catherine could not have predicted his fascination. No, his fixation, on the boy he purchased in 1839. Roman had been 10 years old when Harwood first saw him, standing barefoot in the muddy yard of a small holding outside Augusta. The trader who owned him had no idea what he possessed, only that the boy was quiet, strong, and too pretty for his own good. That last remark had made Harwood pause. He studied the child for a long moment, noting the unusual symmetry of his features, the alertness in his eyes, the intelligence masked beneath fear. What is his name? Harwood asked. His mammy called him Roman, the trader replied. Boy says she gave him that name, 'cause he looked like one of them statues she saw in a book once. Harwood's lips twitched. Statues, you say? He bought the boy within the hour. What no one realized, not the trader, not Catherine, not even Roman himself, was that Harwood did not buy children lightly. He bought them only when he saw potential advantage. And Roman, with his startling beauty and quiet resilience, was more than an advantage. He was an idea, a tool, something Harwood could one day wield with devastating effect. Harwood raised Roman differently than the others. Not kindly, never kindly, but deliberately. He ensured Roman learned to read simple ledgers, to clean with precision, to listen without speaking, to observe without reacting. Harwood tested him the way a blacksmith tests metal. Heating, bending, cooling, and hammering until Roman became something sharper, more controlled, more dangerous than even Harwood anticipated. Yet danger was not what Harwood feared. He feared unpredictability. And Roman, despite his obedience, carried something unpredictable in him. A mind that wandered in silence. A stillness that held its own kind of power. Harwood watched him grow into a young man whose presence unsettled even seasoned overseers, and the unease did not escape him. You have created something you cannot fully control, Catherine told him one winter evening after Roman passed silently through the hall. Harwood looked at her with thin, cold amusement. Control is a matter of design, Catherine. Not possibility. You think him a machine, she said quietly, but he is a man. You can polish iron all you want, Elias. It does not change the fact that iron breaks. Harwood's eyes darkened. Roman will not break. Catherine held his gaze for a moment longer than she should have. Everything breaks eventually. Even the things we build ourselves. Harwood turned away, dismissing her. Yet her words lingered, haunting him more than he admitted. In the years that followed, Roman became indispensable, quiet, efficient, attentive. But Harwood saw something growing in him as he aged. A depth, an inner world undisclosed, a quiet defiance not in action but in restraint. This was the one thing Harwood had never been able to shape. Roman's silence was not submission. It was something like armor. Harwood noticed the way women watched him. The lingering glances, the conversations that paused the moment Roman entered a room. Men too sensed the shift. They grew uneasy, defensive, paranoid. Roman's beauty, far from being an ornament, was a catalyst. A spark. And Harwood began to see its value. Atlanta was changing quickly. Families who held power for decades were beginning to fracture under financial strain, political ambition, and whispered scandals. Land was shifting hands. Opportunities were arising. Harwood saw that Roman could be placed in households where truths festered beneath polished surfaces, where marriages were fragile, where guilt or shame or resentment could be coaxed to the surface by nothing more than the presence of a man who made everyone feel exposed. But Catherine's warning returned to him again and again. He may reveal more than you want revealed. Harwood pushed the thought aside. His plan was too well crafted, too precise to worry about hypotheticals. Roman would serve his purpose. He would be placed in households where Harwood needed soft ruin, not brute destruction. And Roman, beautiful, silent Roman, would uncover secrets without even realizing he was doing it. Harwood extinguished the candle in his study, unaware that above him Roman stood in the hallway, hearing every footstep, every whisper through the floorboards, sensing a storm forming around him, one he had not chosen but would soon be forced to endure. What Roman did not know, what none of them knew, was that Harwood's carefully constructed plan would not end the way he imagined. Because once a man begins breaking families, even unintentionally, the first household destroyed rarely becomes the last. And the tool Harwood believed he owned would soon become the one force he feared most. A man who understood the truth. Roman had learned early that the world did not welcome beauty when it appeared in a place it was never meant to flourish. His mother used to tell him, long before the fever took her, that some children arrived carrying a light too bright for their circumstances. "It draws eyes," she whispered once, brushing dust from his cheek. "And eyes bring danger." Roman did not understand then, but he understood now. Beauty had never shielded him. It had exposed him. It had made him a target in a world where power was built on domination, suspicion, and fear. The Thornes carriage rocked gently beneath him as it moved along the road, but Roman's mind drifted far from the red clay outside. He remembered the whispers from the quarters during his adolescence, the envy from some, the cruelty from others, the awe from a few who thought perhaps his form meant God had something planned for him. Roman never believed those superstitions, but he remembered the nights he lay awake hearing men mutter that a face like his would bring misfortune to anyone near it. Those mutterings, spoken half in jest and half in resentment, would prove more prophetic than they knew. The horses trotted steadily, the driver flicking reins with languid familiarity. Roman kept his posture straight, his expression empty of thought. But the truth was that his mind churned beneath the stillness. Harwood had always valued silence in him. He had shaped Roman into a man who noticed everything but revealed nothing. Silence, however, came at a cost. It left Roman alone with memories he could not change and fears he could not voice. He remembered the first time he felt Harwood studying him, not as a child but as a young man, tall, strong, bearing the features that unnerved nearly everyone who met him. Harwood's gaze then had shifted from curiosity to calculation. Roman never forgot it. It was the look of a man who had found something rare, something useful, something he intended to use regardless of the consequences. Roman had seen that expression only a handful of times, but each time, the result had been disastrous for someone. A gust of wind rustled through the pine trees that lined the road, carrying with it the faint scent of resin and churned soil. Roman turned slightly, watching branches sway like dark fingers against the afternoon sky. The movement soothed him for a moment, a reminder of the forests his mother once described from her childhood. She had come from land farther south, closer to the marshes, where moss hung thick and the world smelled of brine instead of dust. Roman had never been there, but he imagined it often, especially during nights when he wished for someplace untouched by Harwood's shadow. "What troubles you?" the driver asked without looking back. His voice was low, careful. Even he felt the weight of Roman's presence. "Nothing," Roman replied softly. The driver grunted. Men who say nothing often think too much. Roman didn't answer, but the comment lingered. Perhaps the driver was right. Thinking had never protected Roman either, yet he couldn't stop. He had seen too much, heard too much, understood too much to quiet the storm inside him. Harwood's orders echoed in his mind. Observe. Answer when spoken to. Nothing more. But Roman sensed something deeper, something Harwood had not spoken aloud. The Thornes were known for volatility, Judge Thorne especially. A man whose temper flashed like gunpowder and whose suspicions ran deeper than the wells in the city center. Sending Roman to that household was not a test of skill. It was a test of survival. None of them knew, not even Harwood, that Roman had begun to question the boundaries of the world around him. That he sometimes wondered if there was a purpose to the way people reacted to him, with fascination, fear, or frustration. That he had learned to read the smallest shifts in their expressions, as though each glance carried hidden messages he alone could decipher. It was a strange gift, one he had never asked for. But as he sat in the carriage, watching the road stretch ahead like an uncertain prophecy, he sensed that his part in Harwood's plans would reveal far more than either of them expected. Beyond the rise of the next hill, the Thorne estate came into view, smaller than Harwood's but refined, rigid, and silent. Roman studied it as the carriage slowed. Tall windows, blue shutters, a porch that sagged ever so slightly, betraying neglect beneath a polished surface. A perfect metaphor for the people who lived inside. The driver cleared his throat. You watch yourself in there. Roman turned his gaze toward him. I mean it, the man added. Judge Thorne's eyes see ghosts where there ain't none. And his wife, well, folks say she sees things too clearly. Neither type sits well with men like Harwood. Roman nodded once. Thank you. The carriage halted. The driver stepped down and opened the door. Roman remained still for a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around him. This was the beginning. The first household. The first fracture in Harwood's design. The first ripple of a storm that would sweep across Atlanta, tearing apart families who believed themselves untouchable. Roman stepped out. He did not know, could not know, that years from now, Atlanta would remember this moment as the quiet arrival of the man whose beauty would unravel its most powerful households, thread by fragile thread. The Thorne estate possessed a strange kind of quiet, the brittle, echoing quiet of a house that held too many secrets and not enough warmth to soften them. As Roman stepped onto the porch, the air felt heavier, as though the house itself exhaled slowly, assessing him, determining whether to accept or reject whatever he carried within him. The wooden boards creaked under his weight, an omen he would later think, though he did not recognize it at the time. The front door opened before he could knock. Margaret Thorne stood in the doorway, her posture elegant but tense, her eyes wide with something between caution and curiosity. She was not a young woman, but she possessed a delicate beauty sharpened by worry. Her hair was neatly pinned, though a few strands had slipped free, hinting at recent restlessness. Her dress, though finely made, hung a touch loose on her frame as if she had lost weight in a hurry. Mr. Harwood sent you, she said quietly. Yes, ma'am. Her eyes lingered on his face longer than she intended, not in desire, but in recognition. As though she had heard rumors of someone who looked like this and never believed them until now. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The entry hall smelled faintly of lavender polish and something else, sorrow perhaps, or tension thick enough to cling to the walls. A grandfather clock ticked methodically in the corner, its pendulum swinging like the steady heartbeat of a house that refused to reveal its wounds. Roman followed her through the hall, noting everything with the subtle instinct Harwood had cultivated in him. A chipped banister concealed with dark paint. A framed portrait hung slightly off-center, showcasing a younger, sterner Judge Thorne. A thin layer of dust on a table near the stairs, sign of a household once meticulous that now struggled to maintain order. Margaret stopped in the parlor. You will handle cleaning, repairs, and whatever else is required. Judge Thorne is particular about how things are done here. I will instruct you. Roman nodded. She hesitated, her gaze softening. I expect you will find this house different from others. Roman's voice was low, steady. Every house is different, ma'am. She smiled faintly at that, as if she found truth in his simplicity. But then the sound of footsteps approached, heavy, militaristic, the gait of a man accustomed to being feared. Judge Alistair Thorne entered the room. His presence filled the doorway like a storm cloud. Broad-shouldered, gray around the temples, with eyes that never seemed fully open yet saw everything. His jaw twitched the moment he noticed Roman. His gaze narrowed, sharpened, darkened. So this is the one Harwood sends, he said. Margaret exhaled quietly, almost imperceptibly. Roman kept his posture straight. Yes, sir. Thorne walked around him slowly, inspecting him with scrutiny one typically reserved for livestock or weaponry. Margaret watched the exchange with unease, her fingers tightening around the handkerchief she carried. Your duties will be simple, Thorne said. Do what you're told. Speak only when required. And do not wander this house without permission. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Thorne's lip curled. You look like trouble. Roman said nothing. Margaret stepped forward. Alistair, please. Mr. Harwood assured me. Harwood assured you, Thorne repeated, voice dripping with bitterness. Harwood assures everyone of everything. That is precisely why he cannot be trusted. Roman glanced at Margaret. Her face reddened, but she did not argue further. She gave Roman a small nod, silently instructing him not to respond. Thorne turned sharply. Follow me. Roman obeyed, though he felt Margaret's eyes on his back long after he left the parlor. Thorne led him down a hallway that grew darker with each step, as if the house gradually withdrew from the light the deeper one traveled. The floorboards groaned beneath the judge's boots, complaining of his authority. You will start here, Thorne said, opening a door to the storage room. Clean it. Organize it. I want everything cataloged and arranged properly. The last boy who worked here failed to understand that. Roman stepped inside. The room was cramped, filled with crates, tattered blankets, broken furniture, and shelves sagging under the weight of neglect. The air tasted stale like dust and forgotten grievances. Roman surveyed it silently. He ran away, Thorne added. Or so they say. Roman paused. Thorne leaned closer. Men do not run from my house. They vanish. Roman looked at him. Thorne smirked. Get to work. The judge left, closing the door harder than necessary. Roman inhaled slowly, letting the silence settle again. This house was indeed different. Not because of the tasks or the expectations, but because of the fear that lived inside it. It lingered in the cracks of the walls, in the tension between husband and wife, in the unspoken shadows that clung to every room. Margaret's voice drifted faintly from the hall a moment later. If you need anything, ask me. Not him. Roman stepped deeper into the storage room. His fingers brushed the edge of an old trunk. A faint scent rose from it, cedar and something metallic. A warning. He did not yet know that the trunk held the first secret that would unravel the Thorne household. That it held proof of an act committed by Judge Thorne years earlier, an act that would surface the moment Roman touched it. And when it surfaced, the first family would fall. 3 days after Roman returned from the Thorne estate, the Harwood household felt different. Quieter, sharper, like a blade freshly honed. Servants stepped lightly. Overseers watched from doorways. Even the air inside the halls carried a cautious stillness, as though the house itself sensed Harwood was preparing the next move in a game no one else understood. Roman stood near the side entrance at dawn, waiting for instructions. He had barely slept. Not because of fear, though Thorne's collapse still haunted him, but because he had begun to see the shape of Harwood's intentions. And it unsettled him far more than Thorne's rage ever could. Harwood entered the corridor with the deliberate calm of a man who already knew the outcome of choices not yet made. You did well, he said. Roman did not reply. Praise from Harwood was never praise. It was confirmation that his plan was unfolding. Harwood continued, the Thornes are finished. Their land will change hands within 6 months. Roman felt his stomach tighten, not with guilt but with realization. Thorne's fall had not been an accident. It had been a calculated opportunity. Harwood studied Roman closely, as if searching for cracks in his expression. Finding none, he walked slowly toward the parlor. Come. Roman followed, aware that Harwood took note of every footstep, every breath. Harwood poured himself a glass of water, not wine. Roman knew he drank only when untroubled. Today he drank water. Today he was focused. Do you know what Atlanta will become? Harwood asked suddenly, turning toward him. Roman stayed silent. Harwood smiled faintly. A city. Not a railroad stop. Not farmland stitched with houses. A true seat of southern commerce. And with growth comes chaos. That chaos must be directed. Roman knew better than to respond. Harwood walked toward a map pinned to the wall, an early layout of Atlanta with lines drawn in ink, marking parcels of land near the railroads, the mills, the planned business district. Roman saw the name Thorne crossed out with a bold slash. You think beauty is your curse? Harwood said, still facing the map. You're wrong. Your silence is your weapon. Your presence stirs what is already fragile. Men distrust what they cannot explain. Wives question what they have tried to ignore. Secrets rise to the surface in the presence of someone who sees them without saying a word. He turned, eyes narrowing. You reveal people to themselves, Roman. That is why you are useful. Useful. The word cut deeper than Thorne's grip ever did. Harwood walked toward him slowly. There are households in this city that have been rotting for years. Marriages maintained only by lies. Fortunes protected by murder and bribery. Land stolen. People silenced. Power balanced by fear. He paused. You will help me loosen their foundations. Roman's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of resistance he allowed. Harwood noticed. You disapprove, he said. Roman said nothing. Do you believe these families deserve protection? Harwood asked, stepping closer. Do you think they are innocent? Do you think they are better than the Thornes? Still silence. Harwood chuckled softly. You do not know the world as I do. Roman lifted his eyes. I know suffering, sir. Something flickered in Harwood's expression. Annoyance, perhaps, or respect twisted into irritation. Yes, Harwood replied. You know suffering intimately. And that is precisely why you must understand. The suffering of the powerful interests me more than the suffering of the powerless. Roman felt the meaning beneath the words. Harwood didn't want justice. He wanted leverage. Harwood stepped back and folded his hands behind his back. You will go next to the Whitford estate. Roman had heard the name. The Whitfords were old money, older than the city itself. A marriage praised as ironclad. A family known for influence. What do you know of them? Harwood asked. Roman remained still. Little. Harwood's voice lowered. They are drowning behind their pristine facade. Mrs. Whitford hasn't spoken to her husband in 8 months except during church. Their eldest son is rumored to be involved in debts that could ruin them. And Mr. Whitford is hiding something far worse. Roman felt a coldness rise. Sir, why me? Harwood tapped 2 fingers against his thigh. Because your presence unravels people. They show you who they truly are. They confess without realizing they are confessing. You do not need to lie. All you must do is exist. Roman looked away, jaw clenched. Do you wish to refuse? Harwood asked softly. Roman met his gaze. I wish to understand. Harwood smiled, pleased by the defiance masked as inquiry. You will in time. Margaret Thorne's voice echoed in Roman's memory. If you send him into their homes, he may reveal more than you want revealed. Harwood gestured toward the door. Go prepare yourself. You leave within the hour. Roman stepped back, bowing slightly before turning to leave. But as he reached the doorway, Harwood called after him. Roman. He paused. Remember this. Families collapse from the inside. All you do is open the door. Roman walked on, his footsteps echoing through the corridor. But his mind whispered the truth Harwood refused to consider. Every man who opens a door risks letting something out he cannot control. And Harwood, in his arrogance, believed he controlled everything. He did not. Because once the next household fell, rumors would begin to spread. Letters would circulate. Women would whisper. Men would grow frantic with jealousy and fear. And Roman, silent, beautiful, unwilling, would become the symbol of Atlanta's quiet destruction. Roman worked in the Thorne household for only 3 days before he understood what everyone in Atlanta had been whispering about, though no one dared speak aloud. The house was rotting from the inside. Not with decay but with tension, thick, suffocating, woven into the very wood grain. He felt it each time Margaret spoke with trembling politeness and each time Judge Thorne's temper cracked like a whip in the silence. The first night, Roman discovered the trunk in the storage room contained a set of letters stained with watermarks and smudged ink. They were addressed to Judge Thorne from a man whose name Roman did not recognize, though the tone implied they had once shared a crime neither wished to remember. Roman didn't read them fully, he didn't dare. But he understood enough. And somehow, so did Margaret, who appeared in the doorway that same evening, pale and shaken. You found his letters? She whispered. Roman turned, saying nothing. Margaret stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I knew he kept them somewhere, but I never knew where. Her eyes moved to the trunk. They concern a land dispute. Years before I married him. Something. I do not fully understand. Roman waited. Margaret had more to say. My husband is not who he pretends to be, she continued. This house, our life, it all rests on something rotten. Roman lowered the lid gently, careful not to appear involved. Ma'am, I am here only to work. But your presence alone is enough to make him unravel, she murmured. Do you know he questioned me twice today simply because you spoke to me in the hall? Roman did not respond. He had not spoken to her. She had spoken to him. Margaret's voice softened. You did nothing wrong. But wrong did not matter in a house founded on fear. Later that night, as Roman carried water from the kitchen, he heard Thorne's voice sharp and slurred with anger from the parlor. You watched him, Thorne hissed. Please lower your voice, Margaret whispered. Roman paused in the hallway's shadow, his breath held. You looked at him longer than necessary, Thorne continued. I did no such thing, Margaret said, but her voice trembled. Thorne slammed his glass against the table. You forget I see everything in this house. Roman stepped back silently. He knew what came next. Accusations. Suspicion. The slow, destructive unraveling that jealousy always brought. He had seen it before, on the Harwood estate, between overseers, between husbands and wives, between enslaved men who envied his appearance. Roman did not cause desire or fear, but he revealed it. His presence brought out what already lived in people. By the 5th day, Margaret avoided speaking to him at all. Not out of disdain, but out of fear her husband would misinterpret even the smallest greeting. Anne Thorne grew restless, pacing the house, muttering under his breath, glancing toward Roman with eyes that looked less like scrutiny and more like simmering hatred. The collapse happened on the 7th night. A storm rumbled through Atlanta, shaking shutters and bending the magnolia branches outside. Roman was in the kitchen when Thorne staggered in, drenched with rain and fury, his eyes bloodshot. You, he snarled. Roman stood still. Sir? You think you can walk into my house and make me a fool? Roman did not answer. He had learned long ago that silence was safer than truth. Thorne lunged, grabbing Roman's collar. Speak. Roman remained calm even as Thorne pulled him closer. Sir, I have done nothing. Margaret's voice came from the doorway, soft but urgent. Alastair, stop. Thorne froze, his grip tightening, his breath ragged. You are drunk, she said. Thorne turned slowly toward her. You defend him. I am defending reason. Her response was too measured, too composed. Thorne saw challenge where she meant only peace. What did you tell him? Thorne demanded. Nothing. What lies did he tell you? None. Roman sensed the moment a fault line cracked somewhere in Thorne's chest. A lifetime of unresolved guilt, jealousy, paranoia. Roman did not cause it. He simply stood in its path. Thorne released him abruptly and stumbled back, his breathing sharp, wild. I will not be mocked in my own home. Margaret's eyes widened. Alastair. Enough. Thorne roared. He stormed from the kitchen, knocking a chair aside as he went. Margaret flinched at the noise, then exhaled shakily. I am sorry, she whispered to Roman. You must leave this room now. He is not himself. Roman obeyed, though he knew Thorne was exactly himself, stripped raw, exposed. By morning, the servants found Thorne in the study, collapsed among torn letters he had ripped apart in a frenzy. Margaret told neighbors her husband suffered an episode brought on by exhaustion and spirits. But the truth spread quickly among the servants, then through the quarters of nearby estates, then into the parlors of women who whispered over tea. The judge lost his mind after Harwood sent that man. Within 2 weeks, Judge Thorne resigned from his position. Margaret moved to her sister's home. The Thorne marriage dissolved quietly under the guise of ill health, but every household in Atlanta knew the truth they preferred. Roman had destroyed the Thorne family. And Harwood took note. What Roman did not know, what none of them knew, was that the Thornes were only the beginning. Harwood would soon send him to another household, then another, each one cracking faster than the last. The pattern had begun. The road to the Whitford estate cut through miles of pine forest, the air thick with sap and the hum of early summer insects. Roman rode in the back of the carriage, hands resting on his knees, but his mind moved with a precision Harwood had never trained into him. He was thinking, truly thinking, for the first time in years. The Thornes' collapse had not been his doing, yet it had happened through him. Harwood saw that as a weapon. Roman saw it as a warning. He had been used once. He would not allow himself to be used again without understanding the purpose. The Whitford estate rose behind a row of tall oaks, elegant and immaculate, its symmetry suggesting an order the Thornes never possessed. But Roman had learned that a polished exterior often guarded the deepest fractures. He stepped out of the carriage with controlled calm, aware that unseen eyes were studying him from behind lace curtains. A house servant opened the door. Mrs. Whitford will see you. Roman nodded and followed him through a hall lined with portraits, stern men, delicate women, and children whose smiles seemed painted on by force. Wealth hung in every inch of the house, but so did silence. Heavy silence. Suffocating silence. Mrs. Whitford appeared at the end of the corridor. She was tall, poised, wearing a silk dress of pale blue that shimmered in the afternoon light. Her posture was perfect, but her eyes carried exhaustion, as though she had spent years running from something she could never name aloud. "So you are Roman," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze lingered, but unlike Margaret Thorne's fearful curiosity, Mrs. Whitford's eyes held something sharper, recognition of another trapped soul. She stepped aside. "Come in. There is much work to be done." Roman entered the parlor. A harp sat untouched in the corner. Books were arranged with mathematical precision. Letters lay scattered on the desk, half open, half crumpled, as if someone began to read them and stopped when the words became unbearable. Mrs. Whitford noticed his glance. "You may tidy the parlor, but do not move the letters." Roman bowed his head slightly. "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated. "My husband is not home. You will meet him later." The way she said it carried dread rather than anticipation. Roman waited. "There are things in this house," she said softly, "that do not wish to remain hidden." Then she left him alone. Roman moved carefully, dusting shelves, straightening books, sweeping the floor. But every few minutes he felt something, a presence, a tension, a heaviness pressing from the walls. Houses told stories through the things they tried to hide. And this one was screaming beneath its refinement. By late afternoon, whispers began in the servant quarters. "That the new one? Harwood's man. They say he tore the Thornes apart. No, they say Thorne tore himself apart. Same thing, ain't it? His being there caused it." Roman ignored the whispers, but he could not ignore the truth beneath them. His presence alone unsettled people. Not because he wished it, but because he exposed what they refused to see. That evening, as Roman carried firewood to the main house, he passed two enslaved men near the edge of the yard. They stood close together, speaking in low voices, their expressions wary. "You must be Roman," one said. Roman nodded. The taller man leaned in slightly. "Men like Harwood don't send folks like you unless they planning something wicked." Roman stared at him. "What do you know?" "Enough to warn you." The man lowered his voice. "Do not give him what he wants." Roman felt a tightening in his chest. He had not expected allies. He had not expected warnings. "What does he want?" Roman asked. The man hesitated. "Trouble. Ruin. Chaos in the houses of white men who wronged him long ago." Roman's eyes narrowed. Harwood's ambition ran deep, but this sounded like vengeance. Vengeance so old and so buried that only those who lived in the shadows of his house had noticed its shape. Before Roman could speak again, the men dispersed, leaving him alone in the dusk. Fireflies flickered across the lawn like sparks drifting from a distant blaze. By the time he returned to the main house, Mrs. Whitford stood near the staircase, her expression tense. "He will be home soon," she whispered. Roman nodded, placing the firewood neatly beside the hearth. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "When he comes, do not meet his eyes. Do not speak unless required. And whatever happens, do not remain alone with him." Roman felt a chill run through him. "Why?" Mrs. Whitford swallowed hard. "Because my husband hates what he cannot control. And he will never control you." A door slammed outside. Heavy footsteps approached. Mrs. Whitford paled. "Go," she whispered. "Please." Roman moved to the far side of the room just as Mr. Whitford entered. A tall, rigid man with a face hardened by years of pride and disappointment. His gaze snapped to Roman with immediate hostility. "So this is Harwood's gift," Whitford muttered. Roman bowed slightly. "Sir." Whitford sneered. "Do not speak." Mrs. Whitford stiffened behind him. Roman lowered his eyes, saying nothing. Whitford stepped closer, circling him slowly the same way Thorne had done. But where Thorne was paranoid, Whitford was calculating. Measuring. Threatening. "You will do exactly as I say," Whitford murmured. "If you step out of line even once, you will regret it." Roman felt the warning, but he also felt something else. Something rising in him he had never allowed before. Resistance. Not spoken. Not shown. But living. He would not be Harwood's weapon forever. And on this estate, more than any before, Roman's rebellion would begin to take shape. Not with force, but with truth. Mrs. Whitford did not appear at breakfast the next morning. This alone told Roman more about the household than any spoken words. In the kitchens, he heard the whispers of servants who tried to keep their voices low but could not contain their fear. She locked herself in her room again. Did he strike her last night? No. This time he didn't need to. Roman absorbed every word without reacting. Violence did not always require hands. Sometimes it required only silence. silence sharpened into a blade. Silence sharpened into a marriage. By noon, Roman was tending the garden at the edge of the property when Mrs. Whitford finally emerged from the house. She wore a light shawl despite the warm air, her face pale, her eyes swollen yet determined. She walked toward Roman with steps that were careful, almost rehearsed. "You should not be out here alone," she said, voice trembling despite her effort to sound composed. Roman straightened. "Ma'am?" She glanced back toward the house to ensure Whitford wasn't watching. "He asked about you last night. He wanted to know why Harwood sent a man like you to us." Roman stayed silent. Mrs. Whitford exhaled shakily. "He believes you were chosen for a reason. And when my husband believes something, he clings to it until the truth breaks." Roman's tone remained calm. "I do only what I am ordered. That is what terrifies him," she whispered. "You reveal things simply by existing." Her eyes shifted toward the far end of the property, where a second, smaller house stood, its shutters closed, its porch sagging. "My son lives there. My eldest. He is not, well." Roman studied her expression more closely now. Sadness lived there, yes, but so did fear and something more complex. Regret. "He refuses to live under this roof," she continued. "He has debts, and my husband believes he is tainted." Roman did not ask by what. Mrs. Whitford lowered her voice. "I believe my husband hurt him once. Badly. And whatever happened that night began the unraveling of our family." Roman waited, still as stone, letting her speak in her own time. "Would you go to him?" she finally asked. "Just bring him some of the bread the cook prepared. He won't open the door for me anymore." Roman nodded, though he sensed the deeper truth. Mrs. Whitford was sending him not only with bread, but with hope. Hope that someone who held no judgment might be able to enter a room where she no longer could. He carried the loaf across the yard, dust rising around his boots. The smaller house looked abandoned from a distance, but up close Roman noticed signs of life. A lantern beside the window, a stack of books on the porch, the faint smell of pipe smoke drifting through a cracked shutter. He knocked gently. A long silence. Then a voice from inside, irritated and sharp. "Go away." Roman waited. Footsteps approached reluctantly. The door opened just enough for an eye, bright, bloodshot, skeptical, to appear in the gap. "You're not my mother," the man said. "No," Roman replied. "You're not my father." Roman remained quiet. The door opened wider. The man was in his 20s, thin but tall, with hair that fell over his forehead in disheveled strands. His face carried the tiredness of someone who had once had promise but had it carved away by circumstance or cruelty. "Who are you?" he asked. "Roman." At the name, something flickered across the young man's face. Recognition of rumors, perhaps, or of Harwood's reputation. "What do you want?" Roman held out the bread. The young man hesitated, then reached for it slowly, as though accepting it required a kind of surrender. He stepped back. "Come in, if you want." Roman entered the small house. It was cluttered but warm, filled with books, maps, jars of ink, scattered notes. A mind lived here, a restless one. The young man set the bread down and looked Roman over with an intensity that was not envy, but fascination. "You're the one they're all talking about," he murmured. "The one who tore apart Judge Thornes' marriage." "I did nothing," Roman said. "I believe you." The young man walked to the window. "That's why it's even worse." Roman waited, sensing the conversation was leading somewhere darker. "My father hates you," the young man continued. "He hates anyone who reminds him he's weak." Roman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Weak?" The young man turned, and this time his expression carried something raw, pain buried under years of silence. "He killed a man," he said softly. "Two, actually." Roman felt the air shift. "My father murdered them to steal this land," the young man continued. "He buried the bodies near the old well behind the property. He told the sheriff they ran off. But they didn't." A tremor ran through his hands. "My mother knows," he whispered. "She never said it aloud. But she knows." Roman understood now. Harwood hadn't sent him to the Whitfords for jealousy, or pride, or suspicion. He had sent him here to expose murder. The young man stepped closer, lowering his voice until it quivered with truth. "If you stay in this house, he will not survive you. He cannot bear to see himself reflected in someone he cannot intimidate." Roman watched him carefully. "Why tell me this?" "Because you might be the only person who can end him," the young man said. "Or the one who makes him end himself." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, though no storm had been forecasted. Roman felt the air tighten as if the world itself were holding its breath. What he did not yet know was that this confession, this single moment, would ignite the first spark in the downfall of Atlanta's most powerful households. And the next family would fall faster than the Thornes. The Whitford estate began to fracture faster than any household Roman had entered before. It did not crack quietly like the Thornes. It broke with a swiftness that suggested the family had been held together by threads so thin that even the weight of a whispered truth could tear them apart. The morning after the young man's confession, Whitford stormed into the parlor with the violence of a man who had not slept. His boots struck the floor like blows. His eyes darted wildly between Roman and his wife. "You were speaking to him," Whitford growled, pointing at Roman. "I saw you from the window." Mrs. Whitford held herself stiff and dignified. "I speak to the servants every day." "Not like that," he snapped. "There is no that," she said sharply, though fear trembled at the edge of her composure. Whitford's gaze whipped toward Roman. "What did she tell you?" Roman remained perfectly still. "Nothing, sir." Whitford stepped closer, invading his space. "You think I'm blind? You think I don't know what Harwood is doing? Sending you into my home, into my marriage." "Alistair," Mrs. Whitford said quietly, "you are being irrational." That was the wrong word. Whitford turned on her. "Do not speak to me of rationality." Roman had seen anger before, but not like this, not the kind that came from a man afraid of the truth finally crawling toward light. Whitford's fury wasn't driven by Roman. It was driven by the graves behind the well. The secrets written in letters hidden in his desk. The debt of murder that had come due. Later that afternoon, Whitford's son refused to attend dinner. The servants whispered nervously as the sound of shouting erupted from the small house at the edge of the property. "You are no son of mine," Whitford roared. "I know what you did," the young man shouted back. "I know who you killed." Roman, carrying a tray from the kitchen, paused when the echo of fists striking wood drifted across the yard. Mrs. Whitford heard it too. She stood at the top of the stairs, one hand pressed to her mouth as tears gathered in her eyes. That night, the entire estate felt the vibration of a house splitting. Roman had not spoken a word, yet truth was erupting around him. Within 2 days, servants began quietly leaving. Not fleeing, just gone. Families in the neighboring estates noticed. And when the servants talked, Atlanta listened. They whispered. Whitford lost his mind. He accused his wife of betrayal. He threatened his son with a rifle. They say the handsome slave from Harwoods is behind it. No, they say Whitford already had madness in him and the man just brought it out. Roman became a symbol before he understood it. Not a man. Not a servant. A mirror that exposed rot. 3 days later it became official. Judge Reynolds, Thorne's former colleague, received an urgent letter from Mrs. Whitford's sister. The house has become dangerous. Several servants have vanished. Alistair has locked himself in the study with a pistol. When news reached Atlanta, the city reacted not with shock but with eagerness. Scandal fed them. And the rumors wove themselves into a perfect narrative. First Thorne. Now Whitford. Both undone after Roman's arrival. Even those who did not believe in curses began to wonder. Harwood, hearing the whispers on the streets, allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He sat in his office, leaning back in his leather chair, fingertips pressed together. "Good," he murmured. "Very good." Catherine overheard him. She lingered at the doorway, her face pale. "You take pleasure in this." "I take pleasure in progress," Harwood replied. "You're destroying families." "They destroy themselves," he said coldly. "Roman simply reveals the truth." Catherine's voice wavered. "You will push him until he breaks." "He will break them first." She swallowed. "And when he breaks you?" Harwood's expression hardened. "He won't." But Catherine knew better. She had seen the way Roman's quiet resistance was growing, the way he no longer bowed as deeply, the way he watched Harwood without fear. What she did not yet know, what none of them knew, was that the Whitfords' collapse would spread like fire in dry timber. The next morning, a patrolman arrived at the estate. Whitford had been found unconscious in his study, the pistol discharged into the wall, the room littered with torn letters and spilled ink. Mrs. Whitford fled to her sister's home. Their son disappeared into the forests beyond Marietta. Another household destroyed. Another name on Harwood's map crossed out. Roman returned to the Harwood estate in silence, though his mind churned with understanding he did not want. Harwood met him at the door. "Well?" he asked calmly. Roman did not answer. Harwood's eyes narrowed. "Say it." Roman finally spoke. "You knew what would happen." "Of course I did," Harwood replied. Only the blind fail to see the inevitable. Roman met his gaze steadily. You are playing with lives. Harwood smirked. Lives are all anyone plays with. Roman did not bow this time. Harwood noticed, and the faintest tremor of irritation touched his jaw. You will be sent again soon, Harwood said. There are still families to dismantle. Roman walked away. He said nothing. But inside him a quiet decision formed, sharp, unyielding, dangerous. He had been Harwood's instrument. But not for much longer. And the next household would not be destroyed by accident. It would be destroyed by choice. The evening Harwood informed Roman of his next assignment. The sky outside the estate glowed a deep, unnatural red, one of those southern sunsets that looked more like a warning than a blessing. The air hung thick with heat, and even the cicadas fell silent, as though nature itself anticipated violence. Harwood did not summon Roman to his study. He summoned him to the cellar. That alone told Roman everything. The cellar was a place Harwood rarely visited, a stone-walled room beneath the house where the air smelled of earth and damp timber. Wine racks lined the walls, but there were no bottles tonight, only shadows, dust, and the echo of secrets too dark for the parlor. Roman descended slowly, each step echoing like a heartbeat. Harwood stood at the far end, a lantern in one hand and a folder tucked beneath his arm. The light flickered across his face, sharpening his angles, deepening the lines around his eyes. Close the door, Harwood said. Roman obeyed, though something in his chest tightened as he did. Harwood set the lantern down. The dim light threw long, uneven shadows across the floor. You have been thinking, Harwood began. I can see it. You believe you understand my motives now. Roman stayed silent. Harwood stepped closer. Do you? Roman met his gaze. You want land, influence, power. You use people to destroy each other. Harwood's lips twitched. Not quite. I do not use them. I reveal them. I simply let truth seep into the cracks of their marriages, their lies, their legacies. I do nothing but place a mirror in their path. You place me, Roman said softly. Yes, Harwood answered. Because you are the perfect mirror. Roman looked away for the first time. Harwood noticed, and misinterpreted it as submission rather than restraint. You unsettle them, Harwood continued. Men loathe you, women trust you, servants confide in you, secrets cling to you like ash after a fire. Not because you seek them, but because you cannot avoid them. You were born with a face that strips away pretense. It is your curse. But it is my opportunity. Roman felt the words settle like stones in his gut. Harwood took another step closer. The Whitfords were a trial. The Thornes were an accident. But the next family, this one is precision. No missteps. No hesitation. Their downfall will give me the land I need to control the entire northern line of Atlanta's expansion. Roman stared at him, the lantern's glow flickering in his dark eyes. I will not do it, he said. Harwood froze. Silence filled the cellar, thick, heavy, dangerous. Harwood's voice lowered. Repeat that. Roman's jaw tightened. I will not help you destroy any more families. Harwood inhaled slowly through his nose, like a man steadying himself before striking. He stepped so close that Roman could feel the heat of his breath. You seem to be confused about your place, Harwood whispered. Every breath you take is because of me. Every day you live is because I allow you to live. If I wanted you dead, Roman, you would vanish like the last boy who crossed me. Roman remembered the empty storage room on the Thorne estate. The missing servant. Thorne's words, men do not run from my house. They vanish. He now understood where the pattern began. Roman straightened, refusing to step back. I will not destroy them. Harwood's fury rose quickly, violently, an eruption disguised by composure. He grabbed Roman's shirt with one hand, pulling him close. You think this is about morality? Harwood hissed. You think you can walk away now? You belong to me. You will do as you are told. Roman's voice remained calm. You need me. You cannot coerce secrets without me. That is why you will not kill me. Harwood's grip tightened, knuckles white. For a moment, Roman thought he might strike him. But Harwood wasn't a man who struck in rage. He struck in strategy. And killing Roman would ruin everything. Harwood released him abruptly, shoving him back. You think yourself indispensable, he said. Very well. Let us see how indispensable you remain when you are stripped of everything that makes you dangerous. Roman stayed silent. Harwood stepped away, pacing slowly like a predator circling prey. The next family is the Calloways, he said. They are wealthier than the Whitfords, more connected than the Thornes, and more corrupt than both. Roman watched him carefully. The Calloways are hiding something even worse than murder, Harwood continued. And you will uncover it. Their fall will crown me. Roman felt something shift inside his chest, something hard, unyielding like the click of a lock opening. No, he said again. I will not. Harwood stopped pacing. He turned slowly, dangerously, a smile creeping across his face. You think refusal saves you, he said. It does not. You will go to them tomorrow. And you will do exactly what you always do. His smile sharpened. You will reveal them to themselves. Roman lowered his voice to a whisper. I will reveal you instead. Harwood's face turned cold. You forget, Harwood said, voice dropping into a deadly calm. I own your past. I own your present. And I will own your future. Roman took a step closer. A man who owns nothing but fear owns nothing at all. For the first time, Harwood flinched. Roman turned and walked up the cellar steps without permission. Harwood did not stop him. Not because he had chosen mercy, but because he had realized something terrifying. Roman was no longer the mirror. He was becoming the storm. News traveled fast in Atlanta, faster than the trains that carved through the red earth, faster than merchants could shout their prices, faster even than sermons on Sunday mornings. But nothing traveled faster than scandal. And nothing in recent memory spread with more ravenous speed than the stories surrounding Elias Harwood's enslaved servant, Roman. By the time Roman left the cellar and stepped into the evening air, whispers had already reached town squares and parlor rooms. The Thornes collapse, once viewed as an isolated tragedy, had fused itself to the Whitfords' downfall like two halves of a single rumor. And in both stories, one name rose like smoke from a burning field. Roman. In the days that followed, Roman felt the eyes of the Harwood estate studying him with new intensity. The servants watched him as though waiting for him to break. The overseers eyed him with suspicion sharpened into resentment. Even Catherine Harwood moved through the halls with quiet dread, as if she sensed the structure of her husband's ambition beginning to warp. She found Roman in the corridor one morning, carrying a stack of linens. Elias intends to send you to the Calloways, she said softly. Roman paused. I know. Catherine looked around before stepping closer. You must protect yourself. I intend to. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You do not understand. The Calloways are different. If something in that house fractures, if another family collapses, you will no longer be seen as a victim of circumstance. You will be seen as an omen. Roman met her gaze. They already see me that way. Catherine swallowed hard. Then understand this, men fear omens. And men destroy what they fear. Roman continued walking, though her words lingered behind him like a shadow stretching down the hall. Beyond the estate, the city churned with rumor. In the taverns along Whitehall Street, men leaned over pints and muttered. He brings ruin with him. Harwood's using him for something dark. Thorne lost his mind after the man arrived. And Whitford pulled a pistol on himself. In the parlors where wealthy women pretended their marriages were unshakable, whispers floated between porcelain teacups. He sees things. Things wives hide. Things men lie about. Mrs. Whitford said he carries a sorrow that makes people confess. Harwood is controlling half the city through him. Between these two conversations, fear from the men, fascination from the women, a legend began to form. Not a true one. Not yet. But stories do not need truth to take root. They need repetition. Soon, the city papers printed a subtle line on the third page. Judge Thorne resigns due to ill health. Whitford family leaves estate after domestic disturbance. Nothing mentioned Roman. But everyone mentioned Roman. At the Harwood estate, Roman moved with the calm efficiency Harwood had cultivated in him, but inside, a storm gathered. Not of rage. Roman had never been a man of rage. But of purpose. And purpose was far more dangerous. One afternoon, while Roman swept the veranda, two enslaved workers approached him with cautious steps. You the one Harwood send in next? One asked, voice hushed. Roman glanced at them but said nothing. The other man stepped closer, eyes steady. Folks say trouble follows you. Roman stopped sweeping. Trouble was already there. The men nodded slowly, understanding deeper than words. Just be careful. Harwood ain't a man who lets go of his tools. Roman looked out over the field, where heat wavered above the cotton rows. I am no tool. The younger man exhaled. Then you better run, for he decides to break you. Roman resumed sweeping, but his silence held a promise neither man could hear. That evening, Catherine found him again, this time at the well drawing water. You should leave, she whispered. Roman looked at her with a steady calm. Where would I go? North. What? Anywhere. Roman paused. He would send patrols. Catherine's voice broke. Then he will kill you. Don't you see? Elias will not allow rebellion. And refusing him is rebellion. Roman tied off the bucket rope and met her gaze. I am already dead to him unless I obey. Catherine covered her mouth, tears gathering. He does not see the danger he is in. Roman tilted his head slightly. Danger? She nodded. You have become larger than his plan. People talk about you more than they talk about him. Elias is losing control and he knows it. Roman remained silent. But the truth was already pulsing through him. Harwood's scheme had become too big, too loud. The families were collapsing too quickly. People were asking questions he could no longer manipulate. Roman was no longer merely a weapon. He was a witness. And witnesses were always dangerous. 2 nights later, the Whitfords scandal reached its final stage. A patrolman arrived at the Harwood estate, requesting Harwood's presence in the city. Something about unpaid debts, a missing son, and accusations whispered by neighbors. Roman watched from the shadows as Harwood mounted his horse, riding off with the stiff posture of a man who believed himself untouchable. What Harwood did not know, what clung to Roman like a second skin, was that the world rarely destroys itself on schedule. It crumbles through accidents, whispers, and uncontrolled consequences. And Harwood's consequence was already coming for him. Roman stood alone beneath the moonlight, the well's water shimmering behind him like a mirror. Not a mirror of truth. A mirror of what was coming. He was no longer just the man who revealed others. He was the man who would end Elias Harwood. In the final days of the summer of 1850, Atlanta felt like a city holding its breath. The air thickened, the sky dimmed with an unnatural stillness, and even the birds quieted as though they sensed a shift in the ground beneath them. The collapse of the Thornes, the ruin of the Whitfords, 2 houses falling so quickly had unsettled the city's foundation. People whispered in doorways, in pews after church, in the aisles of general stores. And in every whispered retelling, one name lingered like smoke. Roman. He moved through the Harwood estate with a calmness that belied the storm around him. Harwood had not returned that night, nor the next morning. Rumors trickled back by noon. He had been questioned by the sheriff. The Whitford boy had vanished. The land deeds Harwood hoped to acquire had been seized for investigation. Harwood's empire was cracking, quietly, subtly, but undeniably. That evening, Catherine found Roman in the back corridor, folding linens with slow precision. He knows, she whispered. Roman did not pause. About what? You, she breathed. He knows you spoke back in the cellar. He knows you did not break. He believes you have gathered secrets he cannot control. Roman looked at her. Has he returned? No, Catherine said, but when he does, Elias will not come back to speak. He will come back to silence. Roman set the linens down. I am not afraid of him. Catherine's eyes softened with a sorrow deeper than fear. That is what terrifies him most. Before Roman could answer, a sound echoed through the estate, the distant thunder of hooves. Catherine's face drained of color. He's here. The front door slammed open. Harwood's voice boomed through the house, not in anger this time, but in something colder. Something absolute. Roman. Servants scattered. Doors closed. The house folded inward like a creature bracing for a strike. Roman stepped into the main hall, standing beneath the chandelier's soft glow. Harwood approached, boots echoing sharply across the hardwood floor, his face flushed with fury and humiliation. You have made a fool of me, Harwood hissed. Roman didn't speak. You think yourself untouchable now? Harwood said. You think your presence alone can break the city? I will show you how easily you can be erased. Catherine rushed forward. Elias, stop. He did nothing. Harwood shoved her aside, not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to reveal the truth. He considered her another object he'd grown bored with. Roman moved then. He stepped between Harwood and Catherine, not aggressively, not violently, simply present. And in that moment, Harwood saw what he had feared all along. Roman was no longer the reflection Harwood held up to others. He was Harwood's reflection. He was Harwood's truth. And Harwood could not bear it. Harwood reached for something beneath his coat, a small pistol. Roman didn't flinch. Catherine screamed. Before Harwood could raise the weapon, a voice shouted from beyond the doors. Drop it. 3 patrolmen burst into the foyer, rifles drawn. Harwood froze, caught between vengeance and preservation. What is this? Harwood snarled. Judge Reynolds ordered your arrest, the patrolman said. under suspicion of extortion, coercion, and involvement in the Whitford disturbances. You will come with us. Harwood sputtered. This is absurd. I am Elias Harwood. You were? The patrolman replied. For the first time Harwood looked small. He looked beaten. Not because the law had caught him, but because Roman had witnessed it. As the patrolman escorted Harwood out, Harwood turned one last time. His eyes locked on Roman's. You destroyed me, he whispered. Roman said nothing. Harwood mistook silence for victory. He did not understand that Roman's silence had freed an entire city from his grip. Harwood never returned to Atlanta. He died in a holding cell awaiting trial, the cause listed as heart failure. Some said it was a stroke. Others said it was fear. Still others whispered that Roman had placed a curse on him. Roman knew better. Men like Harwood were not killed by curses. They were killed by truth. In the days that followed, Roman vanished. Some claimed he fled north with the Whitford boy. Others swore he was seen near the Chattahoochee River at dawn, walking into the mist. A few believed he had been taken by patrollers and quietly disposed of. Catherine never believed that. She insisted he escaped. And she kept a single object hidden in her room until her death 34 years later. A scrap of linen Roman folded the night Harwood returned. In 1890, a young historian researching Atlanta's early families stumbled upon 3 surviving letters. One from Margaret Thorne, one unsigned but clearly written by the Whitford son, and one addressed to Judge Reynolds but never sent. All contained a name. Roman. The historian tried to compile an account, but the evidence was fragmentary, contradictory, and riddled with rumor. Some described Roman as a destroyer, others a savior, others a mirror that exposed corruption long buried beneath the city's success. The young historian later wrote, whether Roman was a man of extraordinary influence or simply a witness to the unraveling of corrupt households, I cannot say. But the pattern is undeniable. Wherever he went, truth followed. And wherever truth appeared, power fractured. Atlanta forgot the details. But Atlanta never forgot the name. And long after the houses of the men he exposed burned, decayed, or crumbled into dust, whispers lingered. The beautiful slave who destroyed families. The man Harwood could not control. The storm that walked like a man. Roman became a legend not because he survived, but because no one ever found where he went. What do you think truly happened to Roman? Was he a man who revealed the darkest truths of Atlanta, or a legend created by the fear of those who refused to face their own sins? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more stories that peel back the hidden layers of history and expose the secrets buried beneath the American South, make sure you subscribe to the Slave Rebellion. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a tale where mystery blurs into horror and forgotten voices finally rise again. These stories must be remembered. These lives must be heard. I'll see you in the next video.